So good afternoon, everyone. So as you can see my presentation, this was done way back in 2010. I actually presented this in Bangkok. So in an international conference on well-being, basically, for quality of life studies. Now, so I'll be sharing my experiences later on, what happened in that presentation. So, and then background on this paper also, this was a paper for one of my PhD class back with Dr. Alan Bernard. It's supposed to be pilot study something bigger. That something bigger has yet to happen basically. So this is something, an addition. Okay. So what I saw to do was measure well-being through accommodation. I didn't want to develop another separate measure or instrument for subjective well-being because there are a lot of instruments already out there. But the problem is, little studies or little efforts have been done to do test accommodations that would fit the deaf population, especially here in the Philippines. We have very limited instruments devoted to deaf culture, deaf population. So I just wanted to try way back then how to feel like and how to do it here in the context, especially here in CSB. So in that conference, I noticed in most of the presentations, they're not really after the nitty-gritty details of your presentation. What they were after was the culture behind the presentation. So because there are a lot of us coming from different countries, so first and foremost, some of them from the Europe especially don't know anything about the Philippines. So I had to inject a little background of it, especially the map. Once they see it, that's the Philippines. Okay. So I also gave them a background, or basically, although this was a very old data, I don't know if this is the recent one, but according to the National Statistics Office, way back in 2000, this was the expected population of EWDs, about almost a million. Now, of this a million EWDs, only 30.91% constitutes people who are deaf, hard of hearing, or totally deaf, basically. So, small population. Now, out of that total population, in 2010, what I got were respondents from RSDS. I had the help of Amy back then. She was very generous to offer her assistance in gathering data. So, way back then, I had around 123 respondents, students, way back then in SDS. So, the mean age is 21 years old. Okay? Now, part of my background literature was I wanted to find out, okay, aside from just doing a test accommodation, what's the rationale behind it? So, currently, there are already existing laws or international agreements on how to provide equal access and opportunities for PWD. So, way back then, there were literature from the field of education and psychology, such as this one, how to do test accommodations that will benefit not only the normal able people, but also how about those who are PWDs. Okay? Also, in 2001, although this was more of the American, they had a no child left behind policy. Okay? They wanted to propagate that everyone deserves to be a learner, no matter what. And then in 2004, we have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and way back then in 1992, we have this one. And since that there have been other numerous efforts to equate education among all population. So but at that time, this was what I gathered. Okay? Next slide. Now, let's talk about modification methods of test translation. Now, according to the numerous researchers done, Brower, Nestor, and so on, there are two ways of doing test translations. First one of which is test accommodation versus test modification. Okay, let's first look at test modification. This one. When you do a test modification, you basically already change the construct or what you are after, what you want to measure. For example, in some test translations, what was originally intended to be read was then modified into something orally. Now, the concept has changed dramatically, basically. What was once written is now changed to an oral way of doing the assessment. So, that in itself is not test accommodation. We already call that test modification. Or for example, if there are certain measures that were first written and then someone's already signing for it, maybe the contract has shifted from actually understanding what was written, now it's more comprehending what is being conveyed to signing. So that could be a form of test modification. So I wanted to avoid any forms of test modification. And what was after was test accommodation. So under test accommodation, any changes made in the test will not change what I originally intended to measure. In this case, happiness per se or satisfaction. I did not want to change how the respondent would understand or even reply to measures of satisfaction. Now, there are different forms of test accommodation. There are about 5 major themes. First one is extended time. There are some people who would require longer time to answer it, probably because of, say, motor skills deficiencies. They will need longer time to write or respond to certain questions. Test editing, of which I did here in the study, it was simplification of certain words for people to better understand it, or changing some of the words to accommodate a cultural aspect. Way back then, I remember when I was working with Tina on an examination here for a cultural safety unit. We had this particular measure on an item. It says there, I enjoy going to concerts, something like that. That was the item. But when we talked to people from SDS, they said, you know what, the death will not relate to that particular item. Going to concerts, they really need to change it. So we have to change some of those aspects to better relate it to the deaf culture. Okay, so that's test editing. We also have sign test question responses. I believe way back then in SDS, there were some efforts done to administer certain assessment instruments through signing, but it would take longer. Imagine just taking about 100 kind of instrument and someone would be signing it. Although we have video at that time, but still there's what's called exhaustion on the part of the one conveying the instrument and one who answers it actually. So I wanted to avoid that. You also have using adaptive equipment. There are certain equipment that you can use to help you answer particular items. For example, for the blind population, you can have a braille or an audio format. Another one is distraction-free environment. There are certain individuals who would need a special type of room when answering particular instruments. But in this case, I did not go into that. So I know it's clear when we talk about test accommodation in the form of test editing. So basically, that's what I did. I asked friends and experts to help me edit or simplify original items into something readily understood by deaf or within the deaf culture. Okay? Now, I basically use 2 instruments. One is a falling instrument. It's what you call the Satisfactionw with LifeScale. It's the most commonly used measure of global happiness, or global satisfaction. When we say global, it doesn't really go into the specifics. Where are you happy most? Is it about your love life? Is it about your family? Is it about your work? And so on. It's happiness in a global scale, in general, basically. So it's just a 5-item instrument that anyone can really use for research, basically. So it's answered from 1, strongly disagree, to as high as 7 or strongly agree. Now what I have there, the letter A or the alpha, that's a reliability, meaning how reliable is the instrument. If you really take it over again, would it give you the same results basically, or are your answers consistent over time? Meaning if you take the test now, and then you take it another time, hopefully 2 weeks to about a month, will you still get the same results? Now, as the value reaches 1.00, that's a good indicator of reliability. So in the original measure, it's 0.87, which is quite a good reliability. 0.7 is acceptable basically for any instrument. other one is what's called the life experiences questionnaire. So this is something I put into it. This is my own series of questions. So there are about 6 items measuring different aspects of happiness within the context of a college life. Now, it's 1 to 7 also when you answer it. Then the line is 0.72. Again, for research purposes, 0.7 is unacceptable value. Okay? Now, this is the Satisfactionw LifeScale instrument. You have here the original, and then this one was with test editing. Now, at that time, it's a very kind of crude editing, but you will see later on, based on statistics, again, numbers, when it showed that it's a good instrument. So, for researchers, if you want to adapt it, it's a quick measure of global happiness. I'm not going to the nitty-gritty details, but it's test accommodation using test editing. For me, I think it can still be further improved as far as test editing is concerned. Okay, next slide. Now, let's talk about numbers. Okay. I hope you love numbers. Okay. I'll try my best, but this will not be a nosebleed event. Okay. Now, here I just wanted to show you the intercorrelation of the 5 items. This represents the 5 items. Okay. Okay. 5 items versus how they correlate one another, how much they would contribute or interact with one another. For example, item 1 versus item 2 is about 0.6 to 1. Okay? So what does 0.6 to 1 mean in terms of intercorrelation? As it approaches 1, okay, basically they're kind of measuring the same thing. But if they are farther from 1.00, let's say 0.1, 0.21 or so on, they're measuring 2 very different things basically. Okay, I hope you get that. Now, so looking at the numbers, there are certain asterisks there. Now, it will represent how significant or not significant are the correlations. Now, for example, item 1 versus item 2, it has 0.61. So basically, it's not a perfect correlation with this one. So at least they would be sharing some things, some related things. They might be measuring something related, but not totally related at all. So maybe somewhere in the middle. Okay, so meaning, I can still use both of the items. I can live with them. Just get one other item and use it basically. So this is what it's basically telling us. Now, significance or statistically, I could say that 0.61 there is really significant. What's being shown. Now, here at the bottom, total. The black one corresponds to the data that I got. Okay, my data, using the sample of the SDS population, the 123 students. So, versus the red one. The red one is the actual sample in the original instrument as done by Wiener and way back in 1994. So you could see they're not being far different from one another in terms of intercorrelation. And also, when we look at the mean, the average, and standard deviation, it's not really far different from one another. So it's like a kind of a good indicator on my part. Okay, next slide. Now, in educational psychology or in statistics, we like to cross things also. So this is what we call a model. Okay, so highly statistical na siya. So I wanted to look at the 5 items versus my construct or my idea of what satisfaction with LifeScale is. So I have the 5 items here and how they are measuring the construct of happiness. Going to simplify it, okay, what does this tell us? Now, using the indicators on the left side, the numbers, the chi-square, degrees of freedom, the Ramsey, CFI. Basically, what this tells us is, it's a good fit. Okay? Meaning, the data that I got supports the idea that the 5 items So the 5 items, when they were reworded, okay, then when I apply statistics to it, it tells me that it really measures the global satisfaction, the satisfaction with LifeScale. Now, that's the statistics part, basically. It's a good one, it's a good indicator, it's a good result, basically. So that's what the role is, okay? That's right. Now, and what I want to show you is some certain comparisons, okay? When we say SWMST, this is the deaf version, basically. Now, when I also ask the hearing population to answer it, these are the results that appear. And then versus the original version of the satisfaction with LifeScale. If you look at the contact or liability, you would notice, okay, of the 3, the lowest one is for the deaf version as answered by the deaf. But again, it's 0.7. It's acceptable. It shows an acceptable reliability. Now, in terms of inter-item correlation, well, it's kind of below, but again, this is a good indicator. Okay. Now, when we look at the practical application, those are just a bunch of numbers, but what does it mean? What does your measure, your instrument measure? How do I interpret it? Well, I'm happy to say, now, given the same instrument within almost comparable population, especially for this population, when I interpreted the results, the deaf students at that time rated themselves as satisfied. Okay? They're not highly satisfied or below satisfied, but just satisfied. Average, basically. And you can see the SE, the sample result. Now, the nice thing also about my method was I wanted to look into the readability. How easy it is to understand or read the instrument. So you can even do this in the Word. They have this 2 measures, the flashing, the reading, and the piece or read level. So for the instrument, the original one, it's 71.9. The reading ability. As it goes higher, it becomes easier to read, basically. 71.9, according to literature, even an 11-year-old or 13-year-old would easily read this instrument. Okay? In the case of the SWLSD, 75.9, it's 90 improved, went higher. Now, what is the grade level? Well, basically, what does this tell us? At grade 5 and 6 months, anyone who has reached grade 5 and 6 months will easily understand the instrument, what they read it. So, it has improved from the 5.9. So, mas much earlier, ang mas bata, mas mabilis mo siya maintindihan. Okay? So, next slide. Now, part 2 of the study, basically, or the second instrument is the life experiences questionnaire. I wanted to check what would contribute or what would someone explain the happiness of the students at that time. So, there were about 6 items: family relationship, friends, health, physical appearance, school experience, and academic performance. Now, I wanted to check the respondents, how they rated themselves. As you approach 7, that's the rating highly or very satisfied, very happy about it. And if you rated it 1, you're very sad or dissatisfied about it. Now, I highlighted certain numbers. Now, of the 6 life experiences of the students at that time, school experience, whatever experience they got here in this data was very good. They were very satisfied with it at that time, 6.27, followed by your satisfaction or happiness being with friends for years. Okay. Now, when I correlated it with the measure, okay, what was striking was school experience and academic performance. How they see or how they value the education, the grades, their academic experiences. These are relatively higher. Okay, so what this is tell us basically that at that time, way back in 2010, their happiness or their level of satisfaction is somehow kind of linked with their school experience and their academic performance. Here it is the yes. But nonetheless, the others also are still significant. But if we were to look at it, to rank it highest to lowest, academic performance, followed by school experience, these are the two most high. Okay? Slide. Okay, this is the last slide basically. So, after going through the research, okay, what did I learn? That's one thing. What did I learn through the experience? Number one, it's really possible to do test accommodation, especially with rewording of the test at that time. So, it's doable. Anyone can do it basically. Give it the proper training or the proper linkages with authorities, experts, it's doable. Okay? Which we really did it actually in our sector. So we have certain test accommodations. And our future plans for further test accommodations here in the college. Second one, well, the current Satisfactionw LifeScale for the deaf, we can use it basically. And then through my course of doing this simple research, it was the first time I got literature of capital D versus small d. So it was an aha moment for me. Capital D for deaf, being the deaf as a culture, as a living system basically, versus the small d as you're after the disability or the incapability of the individual. So I actually saw literature about it. It was quite amazing. So basically that's my paper presentation. I hope learn something new today. Okay?
Thank you, Royce, for your presentation. So, is everyone still awake? Wala na close breathe. Let me just summarize what Royce has presented by asking you a question. Who here has taken a test? Please raise your hand. If you have taken a test, a survey. Okay, so for our deaf participants here, what was your experience in taking a test or a survey?
So based dun sa experience niya dun sa different tests na he-underwent. So sa CSB, nandiyan yung focus na sa DEF exam. Nandiyan naman yung sa PNU, sa Philippine Normal College, which is harder kasi nga may mga essays na involved na kailangan I need to choose meron ng multiple choice. I got those multiple choice items. So ibang level ng stress.
Okay, so it was quite difficult for ourselves to take a test or a survey. Do you have the same experience? Yes? No, easy ba?
Already, as he observed the test being done, for example, the multiple choice items, it's easy because I can easily correlate the questions with the answers. Then there are drawings that I need to correlate with the sentences. So that's easy for me. So again, there are sentences with numbers, okay, relating each other. For most of the deaf, what's difficult is self-expression. So the essay. So for example, so what's my, okay, so what's the summary of my answer? So how will I summarize my answer? So reactions, or if we are asked of reactions, so how do we express those reactions? So what's the point? So there are several issues pertaining to the exams that becomes a challenge to the dev. So we cannot follow, or we cannot level with the hearing people who have been doing these exams. So this is the general condition or the situations that is being experienced by the deaf community, even with that.
Okay, so basically, most of you experience difficulty in answering tests or surveys, especially if these are designed for hearing people, right? So that is what Royce did. He came up with test accommodations, and then came up with some modification in the test for happiness and life satisfaction instrument, so that it will be fit for the deaf population. So what he did is he administered it to our students here in CSB, and he came up with a valid instrument to be used for our deaf population. So have you thought of measuring scientifically your happiness, your life satisfaction? So maybe some of you were asked, from scale of 1 to 10, how happy you are today? Right? Okay, so I still said it's over, it's 11. Okay, so that's similar to what Royce did, but he came up with different items to describe your level of happiness, at the same time your level of satisfaction in life. So it's different aspects of your life, as you were able to see earlier in the PowerPoint presentation, having satisfaction in terms of academic performance, relationship with your family, or even your relationship with other people. Okay? So with that, do you have any question for our guests?
So Rainy has one question for Royce. And I just want to ask, regarding your presentation, you got these columns for hearing them, for the hearing people. Where did you get those samples? What's the proof of your research, or for the hard of hearing, for the deaf, it's okay. But for the hard of hearing, where did you get your data? Or how do you come up with those numbers?
There were 3 columns. One is for the deaf, and then there were 2 for the hearing. When I really wanted to pursue with the hearing comparison, but at some point of the study, I was told by my professor, better not going it anymore. But at that time, I already had the data. So it was more convenience at that time. But again, this was final study, so it still be further expanded and developed. I just wanted to show at that point that the comparison of the original instrument as answered by the hearing versus the deaf. Now, what I was told from further studies was comparison or the hearing only, well, the deaf population hearing the same. But what I was told for further studies by Dr. Bernardo was, why not just compare deaf with original and the modified one? At that time, I didn't have time anymore. Hearing students who visit the concept of convenience were available at that time.
Sir Rice, just a question. Did you also compare, or did you give
original instrument to the deaf?
Yeah, no.
No, not.
That's-
So it's just the modified one that you gave to the deaf.
I did give the original one, but it was during the phase of rewriting and doing the test accommodation. At first, I had about 5 deaf friends at that time to answer it, and then I told them what were the words that we didn't understand, what you understand. So those were the springboard for how to modify or do the test accommodation. Also, nice thing about the research, what I didn't include here, at that time, when I was doing it, there were other measures also introduced, but it wasn't part of the study. What I did notice was, it was very hard for deaf respondents to respond to reverse score, the negatively stated items. So that was something I had to take in mind for future studies. Avoid negatively worded or reverse items. So, like, if I wanted to measure happiness, rather than saying I am not happy, better say I am happy. Straightforward. Because sometimes it's harder for them to respond to this negative word or reverse scored items.
It says from your results that you got a mean of an acceptable score for the subjective well-being measure. So how would you interpret that result that's simple and easy for us to understand what is subjective well-being in the context of deaf people?
Well, in that slide, the 3 columns, when we interpret the score of the table, they were satisfied. So it's the average. It's when original instrument, there are about different levels of interpreting the scores, but the score from 23 or 28, it means that the students at that time would collectively, when they look into it, they rated themselves as average or satisfied. In the general context. Now, when they look into different areas, so that there's the relationship already, but in the context of CSB, partly they're most satisfied with their academic performance, and then you have the other one, the family, and then the friends. So for further studies, it would be nicer to, but I do have another instrument that would measure the different aspects of happiness. It's about 59 items. It's nice to do test adaptation for it. So I will do now which areas in particular are there. Students here most happy with. It's a multi-dimensional measure of happiness, basically.
Okay, so from my experience, the test for accommodation have been written in interrogative sentences. So in sentences, question 4. So the words, for example, are so that's new word for me, new vocabulary. So how will I be able to express? So would I ask you to maybe help explain the word for me so I can understand, or maybe I could just guess and answer the question based on my assumption, or maybe I just assume that just go ahead with any answers that I can give. So which is the best way for me to do this?
For any reason, for a new test, or for any word test? Well, ideally, if you're in such situation, the examiner should be skilled enough to address your concern, meaning the examiner at the time should be aware of your condition, of your situation, of your cultural background, so that if there are certain measures that are really fit for the deaf population, at that time, you're already prepared. They will identify possible words that you might might find it difficult. So that's one way of test accommodation. So if there are certain tests that are really fit, the examiner ahead of time would do such review, okay, so that when you're ready in that situation, you're already a set of answers prepared.
And if I may add to what Roy said, I think if you encounter tests that has new words or you're not familiar with, it's always encouraged for you to inform the examiner or the test developer because they won't know if it's fit for the people they are testing if they have no idea. So if you encounter, especially for the deaf colleagues, please let the examiner or the test developer know if you encounter new words or you're not familiar with the test type, with the paragraph or any part of the instrument because it will become a barrier to measure what the test really intends to measure. So they will not be able to get an accurate score for you.
Okay. So first I want to share, okay, what is my experience here in Province of St. when I first do the entrance exam. So that's an old test as compared to the one that's being used today. So there are different problems. So application of the dev. So there are different backgrounds, levels, different schools where they come from. Even if we see the one that Royce did in the presentation, it's still hard to measure them, the deaf students, and how they'll be able to understand, how they'll be respond to the accommodation of the new words that's being used, that's being applied. So how will we modify the exam that will fit the deaf? So for me, that's something that's not expected. The measurement result will still be the same because of the different levels that the students have, and the flexibility also as to how they'll be, that flexibility of the exam or the questions that will be used will help the deaf, and also using the visual questions, sign language at the same time will really help. That's a long process. That's a long shot, and if ever we'll be doing the test translation, I know that will be a process and it will be hard. So maybe a test translation after, and then later on we could support it with an explanation of the word. I think that will be beneficial for the deaf. So that's just an idea I want to share.
I'd like to add something to that. The first time I came to Video, I also observed how the endless examples that was quite different way back then. It was more of test accommodation through what? Just running interpreter and that's it. But slowly when I took sign language classes, Ina had also sign language classes, we already started a sense of what deaf culture is. We became more aware of the needs and concerns of the deaf. So we started to implement little by little changes on how we conduct the exam. Maybe just to share with you, before there was just an interpreter and an examiner doing it. Now, little by little what we did was we started to have an assistant examiner or proctor who's also deaf. So it would be easier for them to connect with the examinees to appease them if some of the examiners are scared. Okay, maybe it's their first time to do such kind of assessment. That's one. Second thing, we also started to use visual tools. For example, a PowerPoint. Okay, so what's in the PowerPoint? Basically, what's written in the instructions part, it's visually done with some animation, how to conduct it, how to answer it. So it's much easier for the students to relate on how to answer. Okay? Unlike before, they said they had a hard time. I was the examiner, the interpreter. I would tell them, can you look at the item? And so on and so forth, choose A, B, or C. They would say, it's a hard time for me to look at the item and look at the interpreter at the same time. So what we did, it's already in front. When someone's interpreting in front, they already see it. Okay, so until such a point that some of our hearing examiners also complain to us, why can't we also do the same thing for the hearing population? It would be easier for them also to understand and answer in our entrance exam here in the college. So, well, it's nice to do that, but again, we wanted to standardize the process. In such a way that each and everyone answer the exam will really get the accurate, reliable results. So those were just some of the test accommodations we did, but there are future plans to actually do from scratch, starting from the ground up. Because our current exam was just adapted from the hearing population, but now we're going to do it from zero basically. We'll start from scratch so that we will be able to measure the deaf competencies, the deaf skills, and so on. Next question.
I'd like to request that because you laid out the process of how you encountered and how you encountered what you encountered and how you encountered the problems and the interventions that you have done. And it's quite some time already, right? So siguro my request is, can you write a paper on that whole experience? The accommodation arrangements that you have done through the years. If you can, I don't know if bahala na kayo to figure out how you're gonna do that and make sure that it's really valid, authentic references na really, syempre, 10 years ago, what exactly happened? Okay, let's recall. Mga ganun, no? So interview. I don't know. So it's up to you. What I want would be basically just to have a paper that will document the experience of how you handled the problems, what were the problems that you saw, how you handled it and addressed it, and then as you went through the years, how you have trimmed it down and become more accurate in your interventions, and then compare it with what is the standard accommodation practices for testing, etc. Just to see them how we are developing along the way, and it can be used later on by others who are starting in that process. That's the first. And then the second, that's the first request. The second is a question. I came in a bit late, so I did not capture the first part. Generally, the whole test is about determining the happiness level of the students, and then you found out that what makes them really happy at this point is their academic performance and their relationships.
Yes.
Did you check what are the levels of academic performance these students have?
Well, unfortunately, I did not go deeper into that.
Maybe you could, because it could also give an insight as to, I'm satisfied and happy, but you know they're all failing. Right? Or I'm satisfied and happy, but they're doing well. But if in terms of their potentiality to excel, as compared to a criteria of excellence, no, they're still far off or they're way beyond. I don't know. No? So it would give us some idea, because that would help now teachers who are running the class, or the program managers who are running the curriculum. If that profile will indicate that students are generally happy with their academic performance, but they're way below average in their academic performance, it's a big question now what kind of education we're giving them. That's one. And then the other, given this finding, what is the implication? Siyempre, nanganak na, no? Sorry. Gave birth to a third question. The third question now is, given this and the limitation of knowing what is the deeper reason behind the happiness as a context, how can the teachers use this.
Yeah, but again, this is a global measure. The second one was an attempt to look at some aspects that might contribute to one's happiness. But ideally, it should be a full-blown measure of one's happiness. Now, there are a lot of available measures really out there, but ideally, the premise is if you're very happy or satisfied with what you have, you will be able to look at certain aspects in your life. This is actually more practical for counselors and coaches, or the function of a teacher, which is to guide the students. Knowing your students, if you're able to profile what aspects are you satisfied or dissatisfied with. So ideally, that should be the full-blown application of for this one. But apparently, within the college person, we don't have such as of the moment. Now, we rely on traditional measures such as your cognitive, your academic skills, your motivation, but how about one source of happiness? Maybe that is something that we could look into because in counseling, that's something nice to talk about, basically your source of happiness or unhappiness, which might later might affect your academic performance.
Application naman on my end, wherever I see these things going on. For example, we have job applications for deaf people after graduation, of course, who take exams that are standardized for the hearing, supposedly, and then the company says, oh, we're accepting persons with disabilities, it's all right. So the exams they have are about like 3-hour exams that are timed and are about like 400 items. Just like taking the PE, the vanilla entrance exam. Kaya lang, it's two hours, and then the option just, the screen shuts down if naubos mo na yung time mo, if you consume all the time that's left. So if we have researches like this, maybe we could convince, I guess, the companies here in the Philippines to either, as you said, modify the exams, give the proper accommodations for the deaf people. Because from our experience, in the past few months, the deaf fared so low. They were not accepted because they got 0. How could the deaf person get 0? Because it's not adapted for the deaf people. So it's like the deaf had a hard time, felt so stressed taking the exams, and then they failed, and then only to know that these exams are not really for us, then why say that you're accepting us? So we encourage researches like this para ma-convince natin yung, not just the school, but where they go after, where life really continues on. Kasi it's hard, even for our school, it's a struggle because we are a mainstream class and no speed everything, just to make sure that it's deaf friendly, and it's kasi what accommodations we do for the deaf, the hearing also benefit, and even the ones who are older, like 60 and above, who cannot see, who cannot, the accommodations, it's not really babying them, but giving them what is right, I think, and what is due them, and then it's their place also on the other side. It's just an observation.
So basically, in the presentation you saw there are already existing some local and mostly international policies on doing best accommodation, or how to serve best equality among those for the PWDs. But unfortunately, here in the Philippines, that's almost inexistent basically. So we really need more standards, okay, to do it. And when it comes to employment, we've been partnering for some time also with Office of Ms. Giselle. Okay, so work opportunities. They also shared with us the fear of some of these companies that are really into assessment, that before we accept them, we need to assess first their skills and personalities. But they would say, since we don't have any exam for them, we won't accept it. So that's one thing that we hope to address in the future. We don't mind that. So if you didn't for the college, basically, admittedly, we don't have any exams really yet meant for the deaf. The best thing we can do is test accommodation. But one problem with test accommodation is, unlike in my study, the instrument, the 5 meta instruments, public domain. You can basically use it just like the author, no need to ask permission. But there are certain tests that you need to pay certain royalties. You need to get approval first before you can do test accommodation. So that's one problem.